Welcome to the Relentless Redstorm, where debate becomes energy, energy becomes culture, and every fan has a voice. I'm Jason Safford, and alongside my partner in the storm, Darrell Jazz Johnson, we bring you the pulse of New York, the pride of St. John's, and the relentless heartbeat of Redstorm Nation. Tonight, we're diving deep, not just into the game, but into the soul of the city that breathes it, because here in New York, fandom isn't just passion, it's identity. And when that first whistle blows, you're not just watching, you're part of the storm. Let's debate, let's connect, and let's get relentless. All right, Darrell. Fiserv Forum, Milwaukee, 11:55 left in the second half. You've got all the tension coming off of the Providence win with the emotion of the hit against Bryce Hopkins in the building. Marquette 56, St. John's 50. Nigel James creates the ultimate highlight for ESPN with an acrobatic scoop. The crowd explodes and the momentum has flipped. Tell me what you're thinking at that moment for St. John's.
They could be in trouble, but you know, uh, Hall of Fame coach, senior leadership, they have enough time to turn it around, and they did so immediately with a 9-0 run. Uh, it certainly wasn't a moment to panic, and I don't know. Even, I mean, if we look back on just this calendar year, I didn't even panic in the first Providence game, which was a loss. I was more shocked that they actually lost that game, but it wasn't a panic uh, situation for me, and I haven't had one of those. Um, but certainly, down six on the road, that's a tough situation. Credit to a young Marquette team for being able to be up six. But credit to St. John's for being able to quickly change the momentum on the road, instill their will on the game, and uh, get the win, keep the winning streak going.
I have to say that as I watched the game and it got to that point, I was completely at peace with the idea that St. John's could lose this game and that would be okay considering everything that they had accomplished up until that point. However, that being said, the opportunity to catapult above UConn for first place in the Big East because UConn had lost just before to a very, very hungry Creighton team that played a terrific second half there. And then to also think about the emotional reset this team had to have after the Providence game and what happened with Duncan Powell and just the viciousness with which both the Providence players and their fans reacted to St. John's and how St. John's responded in that game after the incident, and then thinking about this being another test. It's something where the growth of this team, I remember early on, I don't know whether it was the Alabama game or the game against Illinois, Ole Miss, where Rick Pitino was interviewed after the game about the questionable, players at that time, at the point guard position, players not necessarily fitting into their roles exactly. And he kept harping to the press that this team was going to get better and better and better and better. And this was just his mantra from the beginning of the season. And now we're seeing it 12 straight wins at stake, a road arena smelling vulnerability, and they pull it out. And the defining touch for me was the four foul shots. The fact that both Hopkins and Ejiofor went to the line and knocked down both free throws really at the end of the game with a Marquette team that was absolutely unwilling to give up. They played that 40 minutes to the end. And credit to Shaka Smart, because even Rick Pitino said it in the post-game conference that even though that team is not winning, their players are getting better, and that's a sign of a great coach. And I absolutely agree with him 100% because those players did not give up.
Shaka Smart, of course, is probably a future Hall of Famer himself. He certainly made his mark at VCU. That's when he first, I guess, sprung to national attention. He went to Texas after that, I believe. And though the team didn't do well, he got several players to the NBA at Texas, and now he's making a mark at Marquette. Four straight NCAA tournament appearances. Unless they win the Big East tournament, it will not be a fifth this year. But if he can keep that team together, they're going to be a much better team next year. That Nigel James Jr. is a hell of a player.
Absolutely. So stepping forward into really the game last night and where it puts St. John's. Obviously, they're now in first place. Bryce Hopkins had the game last night, and coming out of that emotional, uh, you know, whirlwind, truthfully, that happened in Providence. Where do you rate his game and the team overall now sitting, at the top of the Big East Conference?
Um, Sometimes you got to win ugly. I believe we talked about this earlier during the season. And someone in one of the groups said there are no ugly wins. No, there are ugly wins. Both Dylans went scoreless. Both Dylan Darling and Dylan Mitchell were scoreless. And Zuby had a bad offensive game. That being said, all three players brought it on the defensive end and also helped in other ways outside of scoring. That's what you have to do. That's what you have to do to keep a winning streak going. That is what they're going to have to do in the Big East tournament. That is what they're going to have to do in the NCAA tournament. So these are positive signs that the team is finding a way to win, showing resilience in the face of adversity in that 6 point deficit on the road in a tough environment. It's something Tino said, something I said. Obviously, even comparing St. John to UConn. Said UConn is obviously going to be a better team to start the season. We saw that they've been top 10 the entire season, top 5 most of the season. They would probably fall out of the top 5 given the loss to Creighton. Not probably, they will fall out of the top 5. But the question was, can Pitino in his cauldron, find the right mix of players to get this team rolling on all cylinders? And this team still has room to get better. And that's the great thing about this team. They still have room to get better, but Hopkins is a leader, Mitchell is a leader, Darling is a leader, and of course Zuby Ejiofor is the leader of the team. So the combination of those players is what gives this team, who are now sitting on top of the Big East, a great chance to uh, take away the Big East regular season title, and who knows, in the tournament. But uh, this team has hope of repeating what it did a season ago.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think one of the things that you've seen in these last two games is Pitino's use of the bench in the first half, and in both the first half against Providence, but even more so in the first half against Marquette, the execution of all of the St. John's players continues to improve. Their precision in the first half of the Marquette game, it was a 44-35 halftime lead, and they looked completely in control. Now, credit to Marquette coming out of the second half with 11 straight points and really putting St. John's on their heels, to the point that Rick Pitino, had to tell them, don't panic, we'll get our run. And, obviously they did. Bryce Hopkins was a huge part of that. But Pitino got tremendous minutes out of all the players he put in the game. He got 8 from Lefteris. He got, a very good number of minutes from Prey. Josiah Sellers started on the bench and wound up with 12 points, one of his best games, in the last several weeks. And, obviously, having that role motivated him to be even more of a contributor. So you're getting improvement from every player, including Ian Jackson, who played over 20 minutes. And although he doesn't seem to fit Pitino's role down the stretch, he comes out in the beginning with a lot of firepower, and as the game goes on, he continues to be a, momentum stopper against the opposition when he's in the game. Has great moves to the basket, obviously has the step back three, can really change the whole picture of what St. John's can do, especially in the tournament in March. So I look at it from the standpoint that if Jackson can really get to the next level with his game in these last few weeks of the season going into the Big East tournament, now you're talking about a whole nother level of what St. John's can deliver and be capable of going into March.
Absolutely. Ian Jackson has not been unlocked. He's played average, and maybe he's had some games that were above average, but on the season, I would say he has played average. Um, so I think there is certainly a level that he can go to, and hopefully that level is unlocked, you know, during the final games of the regular season or in the Big East tournament.
Yeah, and I want to also recognize that Josan Sanin, although his shooting was not the best in this particular game, he's also stepping up, and he's playing much better defense. He's giving Pitino exactly what Pitino wants from him in terms of contribution from defensive standpoint. And the reality is now you see Sanin coming off the bench more, both to spell Bryce Hopkins as well as playing that three role where he's naturally comfortable. So between Dylan Mitchell and Bryce Hopkins, Sanin is the go-to guy. He also replaces Josiah Sellers quite often now. So it's something where between Jackson and Sanin, if they contribute, more defensively as they're doing, their offense, I think, is going to get unlocked more and more, and that's going to be a big part of how the season really arcs as they get closer to March. They've got a big game this weekend on Saturday against a surging Creighton team that just upset UConn. How do you look at that game? What do you think we should be looking for in terms of the players and the momentum?
And just wanted to add, Shannon actually started in place of Isaiah Sellers. They reported during the broadcast that Sellers sustained an ankle injury in the Providence game, so he came off the bench as a precaution, but he did play 23 minutes. Uh, One of three players on the team in double figures scored 12 points off the bench. Um, I like the fact that uh, Creighton upset UConn. Not only because A, now the Red Storm are in first place, but B, they can't sneak up on you now. They just beat a top five team in the country. So, you know, they can beat us if we're not prepared. Um, so any chance of a letdown with them looking ahead to UConn, the fact that they beat UConn should should ensure that that does not happen. Um, you know, because it is Creighton, then UConn. So if UConn beat Creighton, then maybe it's a trap game. But because they beat UConn, I don't think it's a trap game anymore. They have your attention because they beat a top five team, the team that was number one in the Big East.
Absolutely. And I think to put it in even more accurate perspective, Creighton was ranked 22 in the preseason. And even though they've had a very tough season so far, they're beginning to surge, as I said. And they're showing you what they're really capable of in probably being the fourth team to go to the tourney when this all plays out, just the way that they're playing right now. They look really good. And, you know, between them and Villanova, I think those are going to be the real X factors in the Big East tournament, as well as getting into the March bracket. The thing that I think that we have to be aware of with Creighton is really very similar to Xavier. They're shooting from the outside, and credit to St. John's against Marquette. They played excellent three-point defense last night, which I think Pitino has been looking for all season long, and he finally got it last night, which was one of the reasons why they came back in that second half so well. They shut down Marquette's outside shooting and forced James to go to the rim. And the adjustment they made coming out of that timeout after the not the 3-point play, but the scoop, was that they started to close off the pass or the passing lane. So James now was forced to put it up himself rather than being able to dish off to, you know, the streaking Marquette player coming into the lane. And that adjustment was tremendous in terms of forcing St. John's to, you know, play from the outside in and really collapse on the shooter. So I think with Creighton, you know, you've got another excellent outside shooting team. They've got some great rebounding with Jason Green, who's been playing, you know, above his level and pay grade in my opinion. But they're a team that's surging. And that makes it a very exciting game. Obviously, now that we're in first place for St. John's, they've got something even more to play for. And for where they want to go, this game becomes even more, to your point, not a trap game, but a real defense of their position. And it's a home court game, which is even more important because they're undefeated on the road. Their only loss in the conference has been at home, so they've got to be even more geared up to win this game at home.
I gotta say, Creighton was not surging. Creighton had lost 5 out of 6, 2 in a row. So they're having a horrible season. They probably will not make the NCAA tournament. They're 14 and 13, 8-8 record uh, in the Big East Conference. And it's a better you than me type of philosophy. Had UConn beat Creighton last night, it is the ultimate trap game because Creighton would have lost 6 out of 7 games, coming in hungry to face the St. John's Red Storm. And the Red Storm are looking ahead to UConn because they are playing a team that has lost 3 in a row and 6 out of 7. Now they know that Creighton is capable of pulling off the upset because they just beat the UConn Huskies, a number 5 team in the country, on the road. So they can certainly beat St. John's if St. John's is not focused. But they should fully have the Red Storm's attention after beating UConn last night. And the Red Storm should take care of business on Saturday at Madison Square Garden, and then be prepared to go up to Connecticut to face who will still probably be a top 10 team in the UConn Huskies next week.
Yeah, to your point, obviously we can't look past Creighton, but you do have UConn on the horizon. Let's put this in terms of Big East reality. In your opinion, and really the perspective going into March, St. John's is currently 14-1. You've got UConn, which is just behind them, and Villanova. Where do you see? Obviously, St. John's has a couple of games left after UConn. One of them is against Villanova at home, and then they've got Georgetown and Seton Hall. Where do you see them? Based on your ability to predict, obviously you went 7-1 in February. You may run the table here in. You went 7-1 in January, or 8-1, and now you're in February, halfway through. You may run the table, but how do you see the season ending up going into the Big East tournament, and what do you see for the Big East going into March?
Um, Obviously, the UConn game is, the one that will probably have the most impact on uh, the rest of the Big East regular season for the St. John's Red Storm. Um, but that being said, Villanova, though will be at MSG, that will be a tough game. Um, Seton Hall on the road will be a tough game. So there are. Uh, is it capable? Are the St. John's Red Storm capable of running the table? Absolutely. But um, it's also possible that they can experience a hiccup or two uh, closing out the season because, as we saw last night with Marquette, as we saw last night with UConn losing, these Big East teams are tough. They come ready to play, and if you're not on your A game, anything can happen on any given night.
And going forward to the tournament, obviously, people have talked about the Big East having a down year this year. The teams not being nearly as strong as they were last year. But is it really that they're that much lesser teams, or is it just the reality that you've got a lot of tough teams playing each other? Because again, I think one thing that's for sure is that the physicality in the Big East is something that you don't get in a lot of the other conferences.
You definitely don't get the physicality, and as someone who obviously has been watching and covering the Big East for well over a decade, there's been the notion that the Big East is underrated when it comes to a national perspective. But the Big East conference did not perform well in the NCAA tournament, and St. John's is the biggest blame in that because they were the top team in the Big East last year. Um, this season, the Big East has two powerhouses in the UConn Huskies and St. John's Red Storm, but also has capable teams that have been in the top 25 this season. Seton Hall, Villanova, and the Creighton Bluejays. Um, I would say all five of those teams will not get in the Big East tournament. Um, and four may be a stretch, but four is possible. Um, but it may only be three teams, which would be unfortunate. But um, you know, uh, there are teams that Seton Hall was performing great and since have played poorly. Um, Still time to turn it around, and we shall see. But the Big East is definitely a top heavy conference this season.
And I think, here I'm going to ask this, and you can give the final word, on this. But just looking at the momentum that St. John's has built now with 12 wins in a row, and I think it's 11 wins on the road in a row as well. Um, the the reality of this team, obviously, in terms of what they've been able to build this season, where do you look at them right now and where they need to be going into the Big East tournament and the March tourney in order for them to really be a team that matters and can go deep past the second weekend?
It's a good question. Um, that is a bit unpredictable. I'll go back to the UConn Huskies of 3 years ago. They did not win the Big East tournament. If I'm not mistaken, Marquette, Shaka Smart's Marquette team, with the kid who's on the Knicks now, and another player whose name I don't remember. They led that team to winning the Big East tournament.
Mm-hmm.
But then UConn goes on to win the NCAA tournament, and it was a big uh, something that Hurley talked about the following season. He wanted to win the Big East tournament, and they did win the Big East tournament, and they did win an NCAA championship. Of course, winning an NCAA championship means more than winning a Big East tournament, but um, in back-to-back years, one year they lost the Big East tournament. You would think that means they're weak going into the NCAA tournament, but they won it all. And the next year, he put pressure on the team to win the Big East tournament. You would think, okay, maybe they might not be focused for the NCAA tournament. Then they win the NCAA tournament. So I say all of that to say great coaches make the adjustments that need to be made. Dan Hurley is a great coach. Rick Pitino is a Hall of Famer. So I guess the first step is for Rick to make sure that the team does not have any hiccups. Ugly wins are okay, like last night, but get the win. And I think this team is capable of running the table. Um, the UConn game will go a lot in determining if that will happen or not. That will be a very, very, very pro Connecticut crowd, to say the least.
I don't disagree with you on that one. All right, you've been in the eye of the storm, but the conversation doesn't end here. Join us online, hit subscribe, and share your take. Where passion meets perspective, that's Relentless Redstorm. Until next time, stay focused, stay fiery, and as always, stay relentless.